All right, so yes, we are here with the economic handyman, self-proclaimed, George Benson from the Vancouver Economic Commission. What is the economic handyman?
Yeah, what is that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really appreciate
of
it.
course.
Love the first conversation we had and really excited to be back.
Yeah, the short one in Whistler.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too quick.
Well, double time.
But that's part of the whole thing, though, right? Is that you have a great conversation, you invite them back. So are you you're the first one back. There's others coming.
Yeah,
There's
the
others
first one that
coming.
came back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oof, take that one home with me.
Yeah.
Economic handyman. So I have the privilege to work for the City of Vancouver's Economic Development Agency. And when I say that, people then their eyes start to glaze over and they're like, well, what does that mean? What does an economic developer do? The City of Vancouver has one. What's it all about?
Yeah.
And fundamentally, the job that I do is very weird. And so I needed a kind of metaphor to explain what that is that makes it kind of make sense. And so I love the metaphor of the handyman, in part because I think people doing that work are really cool and it's really important. But it's also helpful to describe what I do, which is that my job fundamentally is to look for problems in the economy that don't have an owner. That, you think of the metaphor of like someone in the building, the super hires a handy person to work around there. And they're like, hey, can you paint that doorway for me quickly? Hey, can you patch that wall? Hey, can you touch up that window? Hey, can you, what are all these little things are? And individually, they're small tasks. But when you add them up and your windows are clean, your doors are actually on their hinges properly, and the washing machine works, et cetera, you have a comfortable space to live in. You have a place that's actually going to, do right by you. And so that's what we try to do. The commission, both me and my team, is to look for those problems and try to help.
Nice.
No, that's really cool. And we're going to unpack a little bit more of your background story. And we were talking prior. I was in Nanaimo on the weekend. You lived in Nanaimo for a while.
I did.
No way. Oh, how long?
3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 years. And then I had to leave.
We'll unpack that.
Yeah, we will.
And you're from Nanaimo.
I am from Nanaimo.
So let's unpack, and we can definitely dig into the Nanaimo stuff because I think that ties into some of the first conversation. But yeah, a little bit background about George. Grew up in Nanaimo. You worked a little bit in some construction adjacent.
Well, I feel like I'm like an interloper here, like sneaking in. I was saying, I've kind of worked construction adjacent, I think, a lot of my career. So my first job, Nanaimo's a beautiful community, but it's small. And the work is, certainly back in the late 2000s, was not plentiful. I graduated high school in the middle of the Great Recession. And it's like, great, where are we going to find the jobs that are out there? And it's like, wherever you can.
Oh, yeah.
But a buddy of mine, his dad worked at this mill outside of Nanaimo, and I went with them every day.
Like the one near the ferry terminal?
No, not Harmac.
Okay.
This was actually they were doing cedar furniture. So they were actually they're actually building some pretty cool stuff. Unfortunately, they don't exist anymore. But my first job was working there, and really it was so fun to like work with the materials, actually have your hands on something.
Oh, yeah.
To this day, I say it was like one of my favorite jobs. It was just so, I send a lot of emails every day. And back then it was like, okay, you move these things around, you fix this, you do this, and you see the progress very quickly. It's a very rewarding thing. The second job I had was with a rental company that did construction equipment, yard supplies, irrigation, stuff like that. And it was a window into a world that I didn't really have any access to at that time. And getting to work with, it was like small tradespeople coming in, a few landscapers, that kind of stuff. And just seeing how they engage with the materials, what kind of equipment they were looking for, what did what was really phenomenal. And eventually I went away, left Nanaimo, did a little work in Asia and kind of traveled around a little bit, came back here and got my master's in urban planning. And so I trained as an urban planner, but really with a focus on the economy in particular, but also I would say on how it's kind of cheesy, but like, how do we work together? Like the economy is such a complicated thing. And we often characterize it as like, okay, there's the government, which like regulates and taxes us. And there's businesses and workers who are, doing their thing, right? And I think a lot of what we talk about in economic development today is how actually interwoven all of those things are. The government spends money that can drive, innovation, technology development, whatever. Businesses are sometimes asking, and actually these are a lot of businesses I work with, they're asking for particular types of regulations or of, policy changes, taxes, et cetera, so that they can do things more easily. So there's these lines we draw are actually much less clear. And, I go back to being a handyman. My job is to like look for those weird spots and see if someone's saying, hey, can you paint my door frame? AKA, hey, can you, like there was a company, for example, that I worked with a little while ago. And this is a long process, so I can't say we've succeeded yet, but they asked us about, they had a structural thermal break that they were selling. And turns out that in policy world, they occupy this bizarre middle ground. The way that the PST Act is written, there's certain exemptions for energy efficiency products. So if you sell like really high quality insurance, no PST. But a structural thermal break is at first a structural product, not an energy efficiency product. So it doesn't get the PST exemption.
I see.
And so what they were saying was, hey, hold on, we've got guys who are selling like things for wrapping your deck, for example, to combat bridging. And yet our product is better. And like all of the science, everything plays this out. This is better. But because we occupy this weird, innovative niche, we can't get that PST exemption. And people are going with the worst product than what we have. And so, I had to do some research, had to talk with different government officials and say, hey, we think this is actually a really important thing to consider. And it goes into this big consultation process and so on. So we don't know if it'll succeed, but the idea was to like look for that. These are the small company. They don't have a big GR team to, run around and do advocacy to ministers and stuff. They're just like, hey, can you lend a hand? And that's some of the work that we do to sort of navigate those weird gray zones. But again, this was a company asking for, hey, can you change these regulations? And vice versa, we work with governments all the time that are saying, do you know any companies? Can you help us like figure out what's going on?
So did you get that PST thing categorized in the right?
Like it's still in the process. Like we submit.
So what is that process? Like when you submit that, how does that work?
Oh God,
is it like some kind of like Form A /
No, it's to change that would be like
It seems pretty major.
Yeah,
would probably be a change to a law.
What do you do? Do you have a representative that you have a phone call with, a Zoom first? Do you write a letter? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, for stuff like that, usually, like some people go right to the minister, and I usually never recommend that. Like, unless you're really articulate,
But you advocate for these people.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so they're like, okay, well, it's George. Okay, so he's done this a number of times. He doesn't mess around. It's always does his research first. This is not some kind of a claim that's weird. So you probably have a better ear. You have their ear better than any rando.
We hope so, and we try to, and like,
I would hope so. That's why the whole organization.
Well, it's for me, like I'm always saying to my team and all the folks we work with, we move at the speed of trust. Like fundamentally, we move at the speed of trust. If I can't, when I talk to those companies that approach me, I'm very clear to say like, look, I have to. It's very rare that I will advocate for one company at a time because like then I would just be a consultant for everyone to do their government relations work, and that's not what we're set up to do.
All right.
But when someone comes to me and says, hey, I have a product or I have a process or service or whatever that faces a barrier, and if you could help me, you'd help a whole bunch of other companies.
I got it.
Then I get excited. Then that's an opportunity that's worth pursuing.
Nice.
So that's and so I'm very transparent with them. Like I'm not just going to be your guy that's going to go advocate just for you. Show me that it's a problem the sector faces or a bunch of companies face, and then I'll try to help you there. And if we establish that trust as the company and I, or companies, then I go to the government side. I'm like, hey, okay, you know me, I don't just advocate for company 1, 2, 3 because I think they're cool or they're slipping me a few bucks. Here's my case. Here's why I think it's important we talk about this issue. So another one I'll throw out is refrigeration and refrigerant gases in different things like heat pumps. We've had a number of companies approach us from other jurisdictions and a few in Canada as well that use different refrigerants than what we use now. And I'll beg your forgiveness not to ask me all the specifics of all the various gases that are used. But one very important one is that in Europe, they use propane as a refrigerant.
Yeah.
It's actually in the backs of refrigerators and heat pumps and so on. And it's a great refrigerant. It actually works really, really well. In Canada, we're pretty nervous about using that. Same with the States. But we had enough companies come to us that I said, okay, we need to take this really seriously and start to look at this more. So again, we're engaged in a process right now with, in this case, it's actually really interesting because the responsibility for this is spread across a whole bunch of different places. And so for the companies, they don't have time to talk to not just one person, but 30. And that's where my team can come in and say, hey, hold on. We have the trust to pull in some of those government partners and say, hey, we think there's a problem here. How can we solve this together? We all benefit from this. The companies are waiting. They want to lean in on this too. We can try to find a beneficial solution for everyone. And that's, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I want to say it's always kumbaya, but that's the process we try to follow. And it's always built on trust.
You talk about, so the economic handyman, the Swiss Army knife, there's all these different little things that you're getting into. Is there an evaluation process? Like, are you searching out things? Are people coming mainly to you? And then does something like kind of strike you as like a passion project? Or no, this is a broad stroke across the industry. This is going to have the most substantial impact. This is what we need to do and priority sequence it accordingly, that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And and the honest answer is it's a little bit of both. Like sometimes there's projects where it's like, no, we just need to I also think about it from a professional development standpoint and organizational development capacity from my team and our organization. If there's something we haven't done before and we have a sense that it would really benefit us to learn a lot more about it and to just become more articulate about it, we might take on a project that's not the most, it's not going to change the world, but it's going to help us in the longer term. So we might do something like that. But by and large, we are trying to really focus on what matters. And so, in this economic handyman role, the type of problems that I'm solving in the economy have some sort of climate change dimension to them. There's climate change is in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And so when we think about climate change in the context of Vancouver, the biggest sources of our greenhouse gases emissions are buildings and transportation.
Right.
So generally speaking, we're going to be trying to touch on problems that are in there. And then, working with the construction sector obviously comes out it becomes a huge priority in that. And then we start to think about, okay, well, in construction, and this is where I talk to industry. I'm just like, what are the problems you guys are facing? Where are the big challenges? What's going to get us bang for a buck? Because I have a team of 4, and I like to think we pump out a lot of good work for the size we are, but we can't solve every problem. Right. So we have to. So it's just through dialogue really that we establish, is this going to make a difference? And so for refrigerants, for example, just going back to that, refrigerants are a really, really big source of climate change. So if you think of, we use this scale in climate change where we talk about carbon as one sort of unit of climate change, if you think of it that way.
Sure.
And if you get to certain types of refrigerants, they might be the equivalent of 20,000, 30,000, 100,000 units of climate change, let's call that. And so when it's like, okay, should we work on refrigerants? Well, you look at those numbers and you say, yikes. Like by way of example, the Fraser Health Authority maybe a month or two ago, they did a big piece of research where they looked at the gases they put into inhalers, because they distribute inhalers to people who have asthma and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah.
And there's refrigerants that are in those, or technically they're halocarbons that are in those aerosols, yeah. And they found that those were a massive, we're talking like double digits percentage of the total amount of emissions they release as an organization. And so they said,
this is inhalers. It's like all these poor kids.
Well, the good thing is you don't have to use those gases, right? Like you can use other aerosols in there.
Okay, yeah.
So it's an easy swap.
So you can't insult somebody who's in
no.
cardiac arrest.
No, God,
no. No, it's like, don't use that.
Yeah.
It's like, no. And they were like, and that's the thing is take concrete, for example, just changing the limestone mixes can get you way different carbon. And so we're always looking for those easy solutions.
Okay, and this is what I loved about, and I don't know if we were going to go into the whole embodied carbon, operational carbon thing, but this is what we talked about when we were in Whistler. And we've had a few of these conversations, and I love when we can start getting into the practicalities of it, not taking away people's inhalers.
Here we go, the practicalities.
Yeah, the practicalities.
I was waiting for
you
you
knew
to
I was
start
going for that.
I did, yeah.
But he said he starts speaking some there's some good sense making while addressing an issue, when you start talking about, okay, well, there's measured units and there's alternatives. Doesn't necessarily mean eliminate or spend way more money to address.
Yeah.
So when we talk about concrete, obviously, because we're in construction, we hear it all the time. What can we do? All this, and that would be the embodied carbon side. What is the biggest thing, the biggest nut to crack?
On the embodied carbon
side?
Yeah,
on that, or even where you're going here with these units, units of climate change.
It's also because you said there was two things. There is transportation and there's buildings.
Yes.
So when you say buildings, what are we talking about with buildings? Are we talking about buildings that are in operation and are sustaining their air conditioning and heat? Or are we talking about a building that is being built and it's all the stuff going on for the construction of it? Or is it both?
It's both.
Okay, but which is the big problem?
There's a group called Architecture 2030, and they did this really cool project with the UN looking at trying to answer exactly that question. And what they found was that it's about 50-50, really, is we call that operational, turning the lights on, burning your natural gas boiler, whatever, and all the carbon that goes into the building materials that you'll construct the structure with. Okay. So it's about 50-50.
But the refrigerant, and that's in air conditioning units at the top of buildings too, right?
Yeah. And that's a tricky one because that is not the math on this stuff gets so complicated so fast. But in short, yes, it's we would generally call that part of the embodied carbon of that, and we're using carbon as a shorthand for all of the gases, all of the climate change stuff going on. But it would be included in that. And I can't recall off the top of my head where that half number comes in, but Depending on the structure, it could be much more than half would be if you're including those gases in there.
Okay, so let's go back to your part, what you were saying in terms of like the
like what's the big one to address, right? If you're going to say there's a real big violator of something right now in construction, that is something we need to address. I know, having built buildings in the past, and there's so many things that get put into concrete, changes the structure integrity of it, but there's different things you can do, and maybe plays into going a little deeper into our conversation from Whistler.
Yeah. I think it's so in terms of like what are the things we're really thinking hard about in embodied carbon? It's concrete and it's steel. Those are the two big ones, right? Yeah. You, depending on what kind of structure, like there are specialty ones obviously where you're using some different materials, and that may raise some different questions. Like, you're building
steel. Take me through the steel part. Is it the fact that steel took a lot of energy to get to the site?
No, it's the actual manufacturing of the steel, the coking process.
Okay, but that might not be done here. That might be done somewhere else. So when you say embodied carbon, it means all of the carbon that ever was created to get that to the site, and then the concrete is actually emitting as well.
Yeah,
but steel's not emitting. When
it's on the site,
no. So I'm just saying. So some are like actively emitting, because concrete is curing, et cetera. It's off-gassing, all that stuff, but steel's not.
Yeah.
So if steel's made in somewhere in China,
which is mostly where it's made.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that that's not a. I guess what I'm saying is that the steel has to come from somewhere.
Yeah.
And then we are inheriting that, environmental baggage that comes with every piece of steel.
Exactly.
So that unless we make that or have that coking process somewhere else that's done sustainably, is that possible? Like how do you, where else is steel?
Oh, well, or through the U.S. and stuff like that, right? Like
still
Eastern Europe,
steel towns.
Well, this Ukraine situation had a huge steel problem, no?
Well, I think it impacted there's different supply chain things that got impacted.
But I think you're right. I think they did make some steel there too. Yeah. Some big old Soviet industrial facilities.
Yeah.
But do they all make steel the same way? And they all are, as you would say, Christian, like environmental violators? Are they all just to make the same steel?
There would be lots of variations. So it's kind of like the oil and gas industry in Canada always likes to talk about, their environmental footprint compared to someone else's. So there's always variations.
Okay.
And it would even depend on like the type of coal you used. Certain types of coal in different parts of the world have a way higher carbon footprint than others do.
Right.
But the short answer to your question is like, can we do it differently? Yes. We have like electric arc furnaces for so-called green steel that we can use. There's a few others of those that are out there, various models of doing that.
Coal power plant to make the electricity.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a rub? Hey? So like, we used coal to make the electricity to use the electricity.
What's interesting though? I just did a story for the, hopefully it's going to come out in the Globe and Mail in a little while about EVs.
Yes.
And talking about the embodied carbon of the battery in an EV.
Yep.
Yeah.
What's interesting is like I was really trying to dig into this and sort of ease some of my own concerns about this. And one, I think when we talk about and I'm jumping here, but we'll come back to
No, it's fine. Yeah.
When we talk about batteries, one, they're so new. It's not the case that there are giant piles of these, electric car batteries sitting in landfills, just, leaking all their crap into the environment. There's going to be some cases of that, sadly, but by and large, these cars are so new that the batteries haven't been replaced at scale yet. They're still in the cars. Mm-hmm. China is quickly, because they're the number one battery market in the world, they make most of the batteries, they use most of the batteries, and they're also going to be the number one recycler of batteries. I was looking at a stat the other day, like China's on track to be able to they think to recycle about 50% of electric car batteries by 2030.
Wow, that's pretty soon.
That's pretty soon. And they're already doing it at commercial scale. So like, so for one, like we worry about the batteries. I'm getting less worried about the batteries, thankfully. But the second piece is like, well, okay, you got to make them first though, right? Like all the stuff that goes into that, what does that mean? And what's interesting, do you guys know Rivian, like the electric truck?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, super cool, right? They and a group called Polestar just did a big study.
That's Volvo, isn't it? Polestar?
Yeah,
Volvo,
they're owned by Volvo. Yep. They just did a big study looking at the embodied carbon of their EVs compared to other cars. And what they found was the difference, I think, was about 15 or 20% of the total emissions of greater in terms of the manufacturing of the car, which actually is like, that's not terrifying. We can tackle that. That's actually, it's not like 80 times worse, which is sometimes kind of what you hear. But the second thing is, even if you had an electric car that had a coal-fired power plant down the street, you would still get less carbon from an electric car than an internal combustion engine car. Because of the way the catalytic converters work, the tailpipe emissions, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it comes out differently.
Right.
And we've seen this kind of research fairly consistently. And so it's just one of those strange, like, unexpected outcomes. But even I get excited about us going to electric and green hydrogen and other things like that for equipment, even if the upstream electricity is still, coal or something.
Or fossil fuel, because there's a couple things here.
Yeah.
So sorry, just to clarify,
Yeah.
you were saying 15 to 20% more embodied carbon than a combustion?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're comparing the two of those.
But the nice thing is, like, when you've done all your conversions in the system, you only have one point left to convert, which is the power plant.
Yes.
That becomes way easier.
Well,
To bring it under, or to bring it to even, and then under?
To bring it under, like to get to a point where it becomes economical to run something else.
I see.
It actually, we're seeing this a lot in the States, where there's a lot of conversions of these.
Because I was just reading an article, I can't remember where it was, and I'm sure there's many articles that were just talking about there's such an influx, or an uptake rather, in EV purchases and now out there on the road, that obviously now they're like, okay, well, you hear it in California all the time. There's other parts of the world that will have little grid shutoffs and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it's coming to a neighborhood near you.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to think of, like you said, the downstream grid effects, and what are those going to be run by, and are those going to be fossil fuel powered, and or like you said, that's an easy single thing to address, but then that's the whole, what kind of power we're using and all that kind of stuff, right? To the downstream effect of that. But it is an interesting conversation just to see, because it is so relatively new to have to be addressing all these things.
It is, and it seems like everything's like nuanced too. Like
everything's nuanced.
You think of all these scenarios where, you're saying that the 15% variation there, or difference. But one thing is for sure, unless it's a modern car that, let's say you're in gridlock, no one's moving. An electric car at that point is emitting zero. It's not even using the power at all.
Yeah.
Whereas a car is still idling. Still happening, except for the newer cars turn off, like your truck just goes, right? The engine turns off and turns on again.
Yeah.
But most cars are running. So what's interesting is you get into the sustainability of cities and transportation, et cetera, where you start locking up streets because of bike lanes, and then all you're doing is creating more congestion, and you can't get anywhere. Like, there's streets that I've had to go, like, do a complete loop to get to a place I used to be able to go directly to because of bike lanes. So I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that is make work projects and are antithetical to the initial reason of doing it.
Well, and I would say yes, and so yes, there's moments
yes,
where
James, you're a jerk.
No. You don't know
what you're talking about?
It is, and I think the other thing to keep in mind is, yes, it can be. Those things happen. There's poor instances of planning. Sometimes it's maybe not a make work project, but it's a gold star project where it's like, okay, we want to say we did something. So like, hey, we put some, blockades up, and cute, there's a picnic table there. Hooray, everyone, we did our jobs, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking about what would a good place look like, and actually, making those investments and building that out in a way that was going to be, beloved by a community, and not just, oh God, yeah, okay, they rolled in and threw up some things, and now we got to live with it. So that, I think that's real. And I would say that we're in a transitional moment. So in a lot of cases, we're doing these projects kind of as pieces of a larger picture. And so, like, I'm a cyclist, I bike around a lot. I get so annoyed. Actually, even when I was coming to the studio today, the same thing happened to me. I took a corner, and then I turned around and I'm like, oh crap, this is a one-way street for cyclists this way. I can't go around.
I mean, even cyclists are
dealing with it too.
Oh yeah, totally.
One way.
But it's because
you guys traffic lights now. You guys have traffic lights.
What's that?
You have traffic lights now.
Yeah, we got a few.
You got a few. I have a bike too, so no big deal.
I ride a bike sometimes.
Highway 1.
But the other thing I was going to say though is, so it's a transitional moment. Like, we're building these pieces slowly, and so you get caught partway through it being done, and you're like, I hate this. This is awful.
Yeah.
And then later, hopefully, we have the foresight to finish the thing. Like, I love biking to New West.
Yeah.
And I'm going to name some names here, but the city of Burnaby has not dealt with one of the challenges on Boundary Road. You're like cruising along the Central Valley Greenway, and you hit Boundary Road, and you just come to a highway. Like it literally just stops, and you're just in front of the highway.
Yeah.
And so you got to do this whole weird, dumb, circuitous route, and some adventurous people cross the highway. But it's a pain in the butt, and it's because they just haven't had that gap.
Well, so from a macro perspective, in terms of all this planning and all of the employed people who, I mean, you advocate for people, you don't actually make this stuff, right?
Yep,
so,
totally.
But the people who make stuff, it would be an interesting experiment to know, okay, we know from being entrepreneurial, you have to, when you make things or invent things and you get people to invest in things and you take on all this risk.
Yep, absolutely.
And when it doesn't work out, you're still left with that risk. What I find is with city planning, you might have somebody who's like, oh yeah, I just really want to make this change. And they get there and they do something for a year and then they go and do another job somewhere and they got zero impact from this thing that was half-baked. And so I would like to know if there's ever going to be true accountability for people who are planning with their jobs. If, let's just say it's like, if this doesn't work out, your pay is going to be docked for the next 7 years because you did this. And you thought it was a good idea at the time, and only because you're grandstanding for your own point in your own life to do what you want to do at that time. So and I find that most cities are terrible businesses. They all run a deficit. No one makes a profit. So they all suck at what they do. And yet we all have to be like, okay, yeah, our tax dollars at work. And it just seems like there is, I think that, like when it comes to policy and it comes to all of these changes, that these bodies of change, if you will, they need to start to get a little bit of taxpayer confidence. Do you agree with that? Like everybody's kind of gassed out by this, like, oh, seriously, another one of these, another one of those. It's like that. What's that? That frog in hot water, boiling water feeling. Yeah. Suddenly you're like, oh God, this is just happening everywhere. You know what I mean? But I mean, there's obviously the environmental stuff, which I think everybody is into, right? So but the paths we get there are kind of frustrating, as you can sense.
I share that frustration. I think, like, we were talking before about, how was I thinking about the presence of American politics in our conversations about
here we go
here. Let's go in, right?
Let's go.
So
I don't remember talking about that. I'm just kidding. Let's go.
Well, so I did a panel a couple years ago, and we had Lisa Raitt, who was one of the former. She was actually the former interim head of the Conservative Party of Canada, and she works for a bank. I think she works for. I shouldn't say what bank she works for. She works for a bank now.
Yeah,
works in business, right? And she said, and I don't think she's alone in this. She's like, you know what? I kind of regret how much we politicized like the carbon tax, because what's happened now is. It's a solution, not to say that it's the best solution. I think there's a lot of sense to it in certain contexts, but we turned it into this football where a business can't plan for each government because they're like, okay, these guys have one. Is the next one going to have one?
Right.
Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? Are they going to do this? Are they going to do that? So like by way of this is a good example, I think, of like the solution to what you're identifying is we got to work together. And that, again, that sounds cheesy, but like let's make it concrete. California worked with all of the big auto manufacturers in the States that make heavy and medium duty trucks. Like we're talking the big semis, the big kids, right?
Yeah.
And they said, can we agree on a standard together that you guys can meet? We'll phase it in over time. It's not going to hit you tomorrow, but we want you to not fight us in court, to not go through this big process. Because what does that do? That decreases business confidence. It decreases trust. It means everybody is, waiting for the lawyers to decide who gets to do what, right? And they said, can we skip all that? And can we here's our target. Like we have a number we know we need to hit. Tell us how we can work together to make that happen. And I don't think it's a perfect process, but I do think that like my colleagues at the City of Vancouver who work in regulations on the green building side, I'll just single them out for a second. Like I think they work really, really hard with the construction association, with members to say, is this reasonable? Is this possible? Can we find ways to make this more cost effective? And listen, we live in these giant systems, right? Like running big organizations, doesn't matter if it's a company or a city or a country, is hard. And at some point, the left and the right hand are going to have a hard time talking to each other. But they try really hard to make sure that those are not going to be disastrous and they're not going to just walk away. If it's, oh, well, whoops, we'll just see, you guys lost a bunch of money, but oh, well, we'll figure it out. Like, I think they take that really seriously. And so, but I think it really comes back to, unless you can build those things together, then you are going to get in that point of frustration and it is going to blow up. So I think it's a legitimate critique.
Well, I mean, when you look at like the discourse that goes on between Poilievre and Trudeau in the chamber, I mean, you're thinking like it's like a pantomime. Like it is, everything becomes a football because it's just so crazy. Yeah. Like some of the stuff that I don't want to like even say who here, but it's just some of the things that are said. You're going, what? So it's almost impossible for it to not become politicized.
Yeah.
And they use it. Thing is, they're using these as tools to get votes or to bolster their side. But as you say, like there should be stuff that's sort of agreed upon that isn't a political thing. Like they kind of both have to have some sort of, I don't know, boundaries around.
Yeah.
Like
and that's why I love working in cities, honestly, is like as much as we're not perfect and we screw up all the time, the relationship between city council, staff, and the actual people of the community is so much closer than, and I'm not picking them in particular, but of Justin Trudeau or Pierre Poilievre. Like they're traveling the whole country. They're trying to woo people in every province. They're going all over the place. You can't have an intimate relationship with even the people in their constituencies, right? Like they're, notionally they represent people in like one little slice of land, but they're flying all over the country all the time. And that's not a criticism of them. That's just how our system works. But that's why it's so great to work at a city is because we get to talk to people every day who are our constituents, who we work for. At the end of the day, I work for the people of Vancouver. That is who I answer to. Those are my shareholders. Those are my employers. That's who I have to derive value for. And I think that's an opinion that's shared by everybody in City Hall, even if we don't act on that perfectly all the time.
Yeah, well, I think like there's a lot obviously that we can go and go on a tangent on about all this kind of stuff. The further you get away from the people or the things that are actually tangible and meaningful, the less you can address with like, I don't know, real innovation. Like if we just talk about pure construction or actually solving a problem, you can get to it because you can get to the root of it pretty straightforward. But the carbon tax thing, and we don't need to go down on it too much, but like, man, it's just why not? You can't get to the actual tangible side of it of like, well, maybe we could just innovate. It's so big and so high level. The only way you can address it up or down is by changing the amount of tax. Or like you said, from one administration to another administration, we're going to go up, we're going to go down, we're going to go here, we're going to go there. But it's like, man, why can't we just get like, obviously I know this is not a federal government level thing because it's impossible for them to get on the ground level. But that's why it's great to have organizations and people that actually drive certain policies and can be very practical and get down to the ground level and innovate. Because that's where we need to be addressing these types of things to actually make real change. It's just too ethereal and too high level and too high in the sky, right? When we talk about just a carbon tax.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it was, and I know some of these folks who did it, but like it was designed by economists. And the way that they think is very abstract, right? It's like, okay, the economy is GDP and it goes up and down. And we can maximize the efficiency of this by doing, pulling this dial and this knob over here. When you guys are building projects, that 10,000 foot view is not going to be terribly helpful.
Yeah, that's true.
And so this is why I love working at the city level where, we can say, and this is, I think I said this on the podcast when we talked before, but this is why I think the performance-based regulations that Vancouver uses are so helpful because, there was a envelope engineer I used to work with, and he would always say, the great thing about the energy step code is that if you can show up to the city building department and say, hey, I want to build something out of spray foam and chicken wire, but it'll pass every test that you have. Can I build this? He's like, they will say yes. Like you're going to have to win. You're going to have to like do a few presentations, but they will be interested in that because their job is to look for cost-effective ways to meet the regulations they're setting. They don't want these things to be extra expensive. And so, and again, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that that's always what happens, but that's the intention of the way that it's designed is that you set a goal, a number, and say, you guys are the people that actually build this stuff. Tell us how we could do that. And those numbers were built, they were built with industry. So again, that's what it was like. It was all these layers of collaboration that now a project proponent can come forward and say, I think I can build that. I want to do it, but I want to do it my way. Can we make that work? And I think where we as cities need to like take a step back and ask ourselves some hard questions, and this is not specific to Vancouver, but all cities, is what are we asking of people when we want them to build something? And one, are we asking too much? Two, are we asking the right things? And three, have we engaged with those people enough to actually see if that's possible? because like, if we were talking about housing earlier, like there's a lot of, unfortunately, I think wishful thinking in housing of like, oh, well, we can build all the affordable housing in the world tomorrow if we just, kneecap developers and it'll all go away. That's not the reality, right? These are very complicated projects with very complex economics. If we can sit together and ask the question of, what do you need to be whole? This is what we need. How do we get there? That's where you get really interesting projects. And I mentioned Sanak before, the Squamish Nations development, because they're in the driver's seat there, they were able to do that with themselves and get what they wanted out of that project. And I think that's the model.
Well, let's unpack some of that. You mentioned the housing. It's a nationwide thing. It's a North America-wide thing, but we're here, obviously, in Vancouver, a hub of real estate development, one of the most desired places every year to live. There's no shortage of people coming here, but there's absolutely a shortage of dwelling units.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing? How often is this the top of a conversation, actual policy that you're digging into?
It keeps me up at night, obviously. Like, I'm a renter in Vancouver, so I feel the crunch just like everybody else.
Yeah.
I've lived in some sketchy places to try to find some affordable rent over the years. But also I love the city, right? And like so many people, I'm not interested in leaving. I want to stay here. I want to, build a life here.
Yeah.
I like to think of it, I think there's two dimensions to it at the very, very high level that are important for me. One, we are a growing city. We need places for people to live. We are growing faster as a country. Like, we just closed 40 million people in this country.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Like, that we're a big country and we're becoming a bigger country.
Yeah, and we closed that last 1.5 million like really quick.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was the fastest growth rate ever for Canada, I think, since like the 1800s or something.
Yeah.
Like, it was really, really fast.
Yeah.
And so that, that's good news for the economy in certain ways. It's a challenge for the housing crisis because more people, we're not building enough housing for them.
Yep.
So one, we have that as a baseline. But two, we have underbuilt our housing for decades. In the 70s, we look at I have a soft spot for them, but like, there's all these like hideous apartment buildings and stuff like that built in the 70s because the federal government spent billions of dollars. They invested in, look at False Creek, all those cooperatives that are built there. A lot of that was built with federal money. And there's other parts in the city similarly. The Fed spent a ton of money. Debt got tight. The oil crisis happened. Like, a whole bunch of stuff happened, right? And then they just plummeted. It fell off a cliff. And so the feds weren't investing. And then I can't remember the exact timing. I think it was in the 90s. There were some GST rules that were changed for apartment buildings that made it way less attractive to build apartments, rental apartments. So we've had this systemic underbuilding probably for a good 40 years. And so not only do we need to build enough to meet the new people coming, we need to build back from that deficit, which I saw a number a couple weeks ago. I think it's about 220,000 units we're short today to meet the rental vacancy rate of the 1990s. And I would argue that the rental vacancy rate there was probably still already in not a great spot. We should be probably looking at the 70s or the 80s. So we not only need to build a ton to meet our just organic rate of growth, we need to also make sure we build back from what we've not done. And that's critical.
Yeah, geez. Like this, when you're talking about the affordable housing that needs to be built, it seems like we tend to focus on like the projects that I've sort of seen that have been working anyway of rental buildings. They're all crazy expensive. Yeah. Okay, so the rentals, like 2 bedrooms, like $6,000 or $7,000 a month for a nice building. There's some of them around.
Wow.
Yeah, but
that's huge. But super common.
But those are nice units.
Yeah.
Okay, like really nice units. Okay, like great kitchens, great balconies, all that kind of stuff. Like high end living.
Yeah.
Okay, but still, it's still not the highest end living. It's still not $11,000 a month. It's not like Shangri-La or like some of these other buildings.
Sure.
Okay, and then there is low income housing that there seems to be a big push on, but that kind of middle's missing.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally missing. The affordable $1,800 to $2,000 a month stuff is nowhere, and it's either in a shitty building that it hasn't been maintained properly. It's all bad buildings that are leaky and they need to be redeveloped. The crappy carpets, it doesn't seem like we're missing. And what's interesting is that middle road are the people who are generating tax dollars. Mm-hmm. The ones at the bottom, this low income housing, they're a draw, and that's what socialist programs are for. Socialism, I guess. It depends how extreme it is. Social programs, right?
Yeah.
You pay for people who are can't help themselves, which is what it's all for. But the middle there, who can't even afford to live in the area that's within walking, cycling, whatever distance, even for the environment, to be able to like do these things.
Yeah.
We're missing that whole group that's now going, you know what? I'm out of Canada.
Yeah.
I want to go because I can't do it here, which is a shame because there's a lot of great culture. There's a lot of great, like it's almost like the personality leaves.
Oh, well, let's think
you know
of,
what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's put that in a business context too, right? So, okay, I like a fancy coffee every now and again, and I'll zip over to a place like that. I love diners though, and they're dying. There are so few diners left in the city where you can get a cheap cup of coffee, have eggs and a piece of toast for breakfast. Like that's what I grew up in, and that's like I have watched those things steadily just disappear.
Well, they can't afford the real estate
because they can't afford the real estate.
Yeah, they can't afford, like a $2 egg's not happening anymore.
No, it's not happening anymore, right? And so there's the people dimension of that, of like and you just sort of segmented it, right? You've got your low income folks, they're just trying to get by. You've got your middle income folks who are the vast majority of people who pay taxes and are participating.
Yeah.
And then you've got high income folks, and they're doing just fine, right? But that's also true for businesses. You've got your auto mechanics that are just squeaking by. You've got your diners. You've got your soap stores that are like all these, like these are actually our favorite businesses at the commission to work with because they don't get a lot of love. Like I have colleagues that work in the tech sector, and it's awesome to celebrate the next big AI startup. But I want to work with Jim Bob's Mechanics, and I want to talk to the folks that are selling cleaning supplies. Like those businesses are the bedrock of our economy in so many ways, and they're also leaving. They're also dying because they can't afford the space. And so I think we need to like really revisit what we consider to be our economic fundamentals and start to focus on those kind of groups. Because if we don't, you look at some communities like Whistler, for example, they can't find people to clean the hotels.
Yeah.
They can't find people to work the coffee shop. They can't find someone to be a custodian because nobody can afford to live there.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is you're going to watch those communities, if something doesn't change, they're going to bottom out because you can't survive without your base frontline businesses and workers. And I lose a lot of sleep over that. And I tell you, that's a huge focus of what we do at the commission. We do innovation stuff too, but like that's my team's bedrock. It's like thinking about that kind of stuff with the business we work with. And I don't think as a culture we recognize that that's where we need to spend a lot more time.
Well, and then we talk about that, right? The last few years with things getting more expensive, people push out into more rural communities, and you start to see them growing, becoming more vibrant. We talked about Nanaimo's on Vancouver Island.
Or just more suburbs are being
Or just
made.
more suburbs, right? Yeah. Well, like Squamish started booming like crazy, right? But then the same effect starts to take place because like all the
Just
big
happens
developers are in Squamish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
And the home builders
Nothing
are
against
making
them, but
monster
like,
homes and stuff.
Yeah, and there's just, and so it's what is, I think was it, I don't know, Dave or whoever we were talking about prior to this, but it's hard to go backwards. You can't go backwards. You
Nothing
can't just
goes
all of a sudden,
backwards.
nothing goes backwards, Going back to the whole politics thing, like, again, because Canadian politics, so Poilievre and Trudeau and whatever, but saying, we'll bring lower costs back and we'll bring lower this and lower that. Hey, no matter which side you're on of that, right? I think everyone could be down for some lower costs.
Oh, for sure.
But getting there, doing it,
It's never going back.
No.
So
It's
what
not.
do we?
What needs to happen is these. The money needs to go to the right people to do the right things, and it is developers. Developers need to be given contracts to be able to do meaningful work that's actually going to affect the right things, and they'll do it, and they'll do a good job, and they make a profit at it. And if the province and the federal government has to pay for that, so that these developers, just because developers are making a profit, it's no different than a human being making a profit on their life. Their expenses are X and they put the rest in savings. That's no different than a business, right? So that's all a company or a developer is trying to do, is they're trying to get some savings, and that's profit to their owners or whatever it is, and that's fine. But we've got to push the middle ground and figure out, as we said earlier, who is generating the revenue for the city, and it's mostly younger people. So. I don't know. I mean, it should be that it's $1,000 per bedroom
To rent, you mean? Or
No,
to...
there should be $1,000 per month per bedroom.
Oh, like as a tier of...
Including your living room area.
Yeah,
and
totally,
it's something that's livable.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not.
No.
It's $2,000 per bedroom.
Yeah.
And it should be $1,000.
If you're lucky.
But it should be $1,000.
Totally. Well, and you know, just going back to your comment about developers, like let's do some segmentation there. Like, so, you know, there are a few big players in our ecosystem, right? They're really good at what they do. These folks are world class. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I talked to colleagues in other cities down the coast, for example, like down in Seattle, LA, San Francisco. And when Vancouver developers come to town, they're just like, holy shit, these guys are so slick, so sophisticated. And I don't say slick like they're shysters. Like, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like they walk in, they say, okay, your regs are this, great, we can meet that. We need to procure this and that, boom, we got it. We have like 5 designers on retainer, we'll use this one and this one, boom, done, off we go. And they're just like, how are you guys so good at this? And I hate to say it, but in part of it's because we put them through the ringer, right? Like we have a really robust standard here we expect people to live up to. I think one of the things that I think a lot of us are sitting with these days is like, we have folks who are really, really good and are world class and who you know, do the big projects, right? They're doing Oak Ridge, they're doing Sinac, they're doing Jericho, those kind of folks.
Yeah.
And then we have a whole bunch of really, really small folks as well. And there's a ton of diversity in that. Some of them are world class, some of them are just getting by.
Yep.
But we don't really have a mid tier.
No,
we don't really have a lot of. Sorry,
I think we have a mid tier.
I don't think it's as robust as it could be.
I don't know. I think there's
in terms of developers and builders.
Yeah, because they're, you know, I mean, we know a lot of those. I mean, most of Richards Street in Yaletown here was by those guys.
But do you think that they're
pretty good considering?
No, and I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying like I would love it if we had more.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so many Italians. But all those guys, I mean, and they're also moving up market too.
Yeah,
like the stuff that they're doing on Georgia Street there. I mean, that's $3,000 or $4,000 a square foot.
Yeah,
maybe even more, $5,000. Like those Sky Homes and all that stuff.
I think I do kind of know what you're saying though, and if we bring it back into let's bring it back into actual construction, actual building. This is awesome conversation in terms of economy. These are all things when we sit and talk with customers or general contractors or developers, they're all saying the same. Like they're businessmen, they're entrepreneurs. They know the economy, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Businessmen and women, everybody. They want to be doing the same things. They want to be addressing the housing issue. Mm-hmm. They want to build a team with enough people or the right people so they can be productive. We'll get into productivity stuff. So they can address all the shortage stuff, the housing shortage, the labor shortage, whatever the shortage happens to be, or dealing with volatility in pricing. But there is a desire from that tier, I think I know what you're saying, that people want to be addressing this, and not all of them are super qualified to get in there.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Well, not just that they're not qualified, is that I don't think we're giving them opportunities.
Okay.
That's where I'm coming from. Is I don't think we're giving them the opportunities that they need.
And sorry, that's the point that I'm trying to get to, is they all talk about wanting to build these things, but they're not. Right? They're not. Just to your point there, they don't have the opportunity. Are they not getting their foot in the door? Is the government not moving something fast enough? Are there not enough projects out for tender for these lower income housing or whatever it happens to be? That's kind of the thing right there. So if there's more opportunities out there, then there's more of those guys that can thrive.
Yeah. And I think some of those, sometimes those are policy and regulatory barriers. So that's changing zoning, like opening up the city. Yep. Vancouver Plan started that conversation here in the city of needing to go further. But I don't know if you guys saw that announcement from the province. Vancouver was, we got slapped on the wrist and said, you guys are not building enough housing. And a number of other communities across the province were as well. I think I'm really excited that we have a provincial government here. And I think this is the beautiful thing about this is I think this is actually becoming nonpartisan. I actually don't think this is something that is going to be,
it's hard to ignore it, obviously.
Well, it's so hard to ignore. But I think like everybody's kind of learned, like we talked about foreign buyers for years. Yep. We did a bunch of stuff there and it didn't work.
Yep.
It just it helped a little bit. Like, we have the vacancy tax here in Vancouver that helped a little bit, but it didn't cut to the root of the problem. And now we're sitting here saying we got to build more houses. We just have to do that. So I'm optimistic that we can create those opportunities for the folks we're talking about, but we need to shift the policy conversation and just make it easier on that level. But then I also think we need to get creative. And so one of the examples is that there's some work that Renewable Cities is a think tank locally here, and a few others have done on leveraging publicly owned sites, especially transit sites, to build not just affordable housing, but mixed use developments with affordable housing in them. So like I used to live on the North Shore for a little while. I was always going through Phibbs Exchange.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, I was like, what an absolute armpit
Yeah.
this site is, right? Like it's on the edge of the highway. It has no connectivity. I bike there sometimes and it's just like you're taking your life in your hands.
Yeah.
And then you look beside it, like the district is finally,
Yeah.
and I think they've been on the naughty list for a long time, is finally starting to build some density.
Yeah.
But that is a publicly owned site.
Yeah.
You talk about entrepreneurship, like why can't we leverage that? So leveraging all those sites around the province, and there are thousands of them on transit, near good jobs, near amenities, we could build on those sites. So let's make the regulations easier over here just so people can build. And then where there's a strategic opportunity,
But it's
let's
what
come
are they
together.
building is the thing, though. Because you're building... Okay, so when you look at what Concord did downtown, they had X amount of buildings they were going to do, and then they had to have subsidized housing in there as well. So what's that called these days? Is it still called subsidized? What's it called?
Subsidized
Government programs.
in the zoning world, we call it inclusionary zoning. So like you get to build something and we say there's a percentage you must build for affordable.
So that was done pretty well. But now there is parking lots where we're putting ATCO trailers and putting beds in them, and drug addicts are in them. Okay, so this isn't the same. So we're essentially, we've muddied the waters in terms of what the public thinks of a housing and homelessness crisis. The path should be to have enough rentals for everybody to sustainably live to a point where they can own something. The problem is that renters, they keep renting and they're just churning and burning their cash the whole time, and they never get anywhere, and they can't buy anything because it's too expensive. So there needs to be programs which are a springboard for somebody to own something. And maybe it's like it's a point system where if you rent for a certain amount of years, you have, certain opportunities at these other places.
Yep.
I just don't think that.
Can I pick up on that?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
So Habitat for Humanity is really cool. I was at a conference last year, and I met the head of Habitat for Humanity International.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting because this guy has like a bird's eye view of all the different work they do. And he was talking about how different some of the chapters of Habitat for Humanity are. And I was telling him I met with Habitat for Humanity here locally, and they do some really cool stuff. But one of the things that they do, they have a few projects here where they do this. They have a system set up with banks. So they actually partner. This comes back to partnership, working together. Yeah. They partnered with banks and said, hey, if we have people who pay rent to us reliably for years, could we figure out a system where, to your point, they are able to then cash out on that in some way and go use this as a springboard? Like, so if they're in our house, if they were like either on the street or they were about to be on the street, they're staying with family or something, they can get into one of our houses, they pay rent for 5 years. Can we figure out a way to make that basically a down payment? And they made that work. Yeah. And so they're graduating out of this. So we're building wealth. We're building support of like people's capacity to participate in the economy. We're keeping them safe and housed. Like those are the kinds of solutions that get me really excited. So
there's a perfect way to do this. Is that you have, for those programs, you have a 95% ownership of the property, and 5% is owned by the other body that helped fund that. So everyone gets the uptick in the property value because the property values just continue to go up, right? So the people that had the 5% that helped that happen get the lift as well. It actually all works.
There are a few different programs that do that. I get a teeny bit nervous on everybody getting 100% of it. So like there's some of the programs I've seen that are cool. And this, I think, like trying to keep this in construction too. Like
so when you say 100%, what do you mean exactly?
So you don't get 100% of the lift on the unit. There's a cap on it. And so you can only sell it for a certain amount.
But that's what I'm saying is if the two parties share in the lift, then there doesn't need to be a cap.
Well, but then it becomes, if land prices are going up really fast, then if you're the first one in, you win big. But then the second person who buys that unit, if the lift has been really high, you got to be a high income person to buy into that unit now.
Oh, yeah, I see. I'm saying that these other units, they only have that from the renter situation each time.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. No, then I think we're talking about the same thing then, where you're benefiting. Like
so they basically go to a place that's a regular building,
right?
Anywhere. Yeah. They're just on this new program. So the rental thing had it was paying into credits or whatever that would be, and then and then that is able to go to a place where there's that 5%.
And I think like I could geek out about this, so you guys got to stop me here. But I'll just like my thought here goes to like, we just need to get like, we on the government side need to get a little bit more creative about how we plan for those things. And I think you're seeing some of those changes, but like, you know, we talked about risk aversion earlier, where we have to be risk averse, because if the government makes a really big mistake, it impacts a lot of people. So that's where that comes from. But we do need to take more chances and think differently. So I think programs like this, whatever they are, we need to work on those. But for me, so much of it comes back to zoning. It's such an easy lever for us to flip and say, we're going to let people build more density in different places.
Well, that's just the thing, right? So the problem that we talked about originally is just the housing shortage, right? There's all sorts of nuances, which I think is like, that's really good conversation around home ownership and how to more people get in there, because it seems like a dream that's dying.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's not even a dream at all anymore. Maybe it's
I don't think I'll have one house.
It's not even a thought or anything, you know, and it's regardless of what you think about that, I don't know, right? But to address the real thing of a housing shortage, you've got the builders that can build them.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like you're lacking. Okay, again, a lot of these teams are already set up. They got people, they can build, they can take on more, I'm sure. So you're saying, yes, it's from a zoning standpoint to be able to just flip a switch, or again, that's never the case with municipalities or government agencies, but to address it from that standpoint, then you all of a sudden have more product that's out there to go and tender and build and now put people in. It's to take the first next step. That's the most logical thing, is to be speeding up that process. Not that builders need to build faster. They can do it as efficiently as they need to already. They just need to have them there ready to go and available to be building. So, yeah, I don't know if it's like anything magical.
No, and that's the thing is like we can get really excited, and I am excited. Don't get me wrong about like, you know, we have companies in Vancouver like Intelligent City, for example.
Yeah.
Off-site manufacturing, pre-assembly, like they're doing some really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, BC for many years was a hub of off-site construction and modular buildings of all kinds. But I think I like that stuff, and I'd like to see more of it. But we don't need all of that ready tomorrow. To your point, to get building, we can do that.
Yeah.
And I think if we can, what I would really love to see is like the original Vancouver Specials, you know, that we know and love.
Yeah.
You used to be able to go to the planning department and buy the plans for one of those for $20. And then you and your pals could go build a house.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Huh.
So what's the Vancouver Special 2.0? Is it a mass timber building? Is it does it have some prefab elements in it? It's you know, we live in a world where we want to be really energy efficient. We want it to be resilient. So maybe it's got heat pumps built into it. I think that's a pretty good idea with the heat these days. But what is that model, right? And can we get to a point where we have political agreement and technical agreement? We need both. We need the public to be like, yep, we like those. Yep. And we need the smart engineers and other folks to say, it's not going to fall down. It's good to go. But what is that? What does that look like? I have visions in my head of what that could be, but I think as a city, if we can come together and nail down a few of those models, that would be fantastic. And that would give us productivity increases, because you can pre-permit something like that, right? You can say, okay, well, you're using the standard model. We know what the electrical is. We know what the plumbing is. We know everything. Great. Boom, 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 boom. Just do that. Just do that and slap whatever coat of paint you wanted at the end.
Well, I mean, and like AI programs, you don't even need that anymore. It's like, here are these things. Here's the deviations we need to make from that, and it would know.
Yeah, totally.
So it can be. Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
What was that?
There's no architects.
Plan 1 or B.
No. What was that called? Where you said the two guys could originally walk in and grab up.
That was the Vancouver Specials.
The Vancouver Specials.
The Vancouver Specials.
And they're specific designed houses.
Yeah, no, totally. The wording that you used, but the 2.0 version of that, it's true. Like, this just takes some innovation, some creativity, and some agreement amongst a few groups, a couple groups, whatever. But we did talk about this a couple pods ago, just about how slow certain things, municipalities go or whatever. But like, you even just said pre-permitted, use those words. Like, that's like
a swear word.
That's just, that's a total swear. It's like,
don't tell my colleagues.
What do you mean? You mean someone's not going to do something for 6 to 9 months now? Like, wow.
And what I'm painting, like, I'm painting the dream, right?
Of course,
like we're not there yet, but I think, like, if we can find what those are, and there's always going to be caveats. There's always going to be places where, like, okay, maybe, you know, we like this 99% of the areas, we don't like it here because we have a really good reason. But I go back to trust. Like if we have built these processes and we have trust, then it's hopefully less of a big bugaboo every time we say, okay, you know what? We're in the green swim lane here. Everything's fine. Oh, you're going into yellow. Can we pause here for a sec? Come back. Let's discuss this before you go too far. And I think, one of the things the city does that I think is interesting, and it's a blessing and a curse, but it is us trying to navigate the processes we have, is we have the pre-consultation submissions and stuff we do, right? Like you're not going for your development permit yet, or pre-rezoning even. You're just like thinking about something, and you can go in and say, we're spitballing. What do you think? Like that's an attempt to kind of defray some of that. And I think, I hope we continue to see things like that just ease the burden, heighten the trust, and create more confidence for folks that are trying to build these projects.
Yeah, totally. Even bringing a few months back on the whole overall project timeline. Like there's lots of ways to get creative about doing this and streamlining a few things, planning, permitting, all the pre-construction kind of stuff. And then we talked about it earlier, just a little bit about on the productivity side of construction. And I know you maybe want to touch on that. But the whole thing's involved in the entire chain of bringing a new piece of product to market. It needs to get there quicker.
Yeah. But you were talking about how do you make the humans more efficient earlier on in our conversation. And you guys did we say that? I thought we did.
I think
you guys did. Okay, how to deliver quicker, more efficiently, et cetera?
Quicker and more efficiently. Well, it's something that, and this almost comes back to like we originally were talking about the embodied carbon thing and dealing with concrete and steel, and we had a conversation. I think it was the Victaulic guys. They did talk about the recycled steel.
Yeah.
Then they started getting into like planning for the end of a building.
Yeah.
Right.
And the unbuilder guys too as well.
And unbuilders as well. We had Adam on, but this all plays into the modular component, everything, right? Mm-hmm. But just planning for the end, meaning you're designing things from a standard component point of view, right? Now we're talking about, yes, there's a modular component to that. Yes, you need less people technically to put these things up. They need to be skilled, of course, but to be able to, once you say, okay, we've sped up a process for what we want to do here, actually, because it's kind of a kit, this Vancouver Special 2.0, and again, you don't want everything to look like,
the same.
Yeah, the same 1980s, Europe or whatever, Eastern Europe, all gray or whatever, but no, with some character, but to be able to say, okay, here it is, there's there, and that's how we're going to build it, and it comes together just much quicker. That kind of stuff is it's exciting. It is a dream, but it is starting to come together. Like there are pieces of it that are starting to take place.
It doesn't work with density, does it?
I think it can.
How?
I think it can.
Because when you're talking about, you can't get one person to go buy a Vancouver. You need a flat piece of land with nothing on top of it to do the Vancouver Special model. Because it was a lot, and then here's the plans.
I mean, when we're talking demolition and reshaping the site and everything, you can't. It's not going to be as perfect. But from the structural perspective, I think we're hoping can we get to 80% of that at least, right? Where there's like a fair,
like for a developer with multi-units, and is it what you mean?
Yeah.
Or for like someone to be, I want to go get the plans to build it for my family.
I think
there's not enough land for that.
No, there's not enough land for that, and I think we've left the point at which that's
not viable yet.
Like construction is more complicated than it was back then, right? Like you could have two folks with hammers and nails go and do something like that back then.
But modular stuff's come a long way. I mean, it could be where you're getting the components from. It will at some point become Lego bricks. I mean, it really just will.
I think it will for a bunch. I think labor costs are driving us that way, obviously.
Yeah.
I think environmental considerations are driving us that way, obviously. There's some really cool work being done in Brussels and Amsterdam and Copenhagen where they're designing the buildings to be deconstructed from the jump.
Yeah.
There's a really cool company I met with in Amsterdam called Madaster, and they have this really cool platform. Do you guys know Materials Passports?
No.
Oh, no.
It's a documentation process where you take whatever your thing is, your wall assembly, your roof tiles, whatever, and you have done various tests and documentation along the way of like, okay, the copper in this came from here, the wood in this came from there, blah, blah, blah. And all you're doing is you're getting each person in the value chain to just put a stamp on it and say, yep, we made it, here are the statistics associated with it, here you go. And then when you have a composite product, like some sort of wall assembly, let's say, you're pulling in all of those in a passport for that thing. And when you build a whole structure, these Madaster guys, they stack all those passports together, and they can give you a picture of the value of your structure, not just in terms of the land, right, or the going rate PSF for whatever you're selling, but they can actually tell you the value of all of that and the materials in it. So if you could say, oh well, we bought super high value triple glazed windows, and we know that they're still their lifespan is they've still got another 10 years in them when we plan to demo this building. Great, their resale value will be ABCD. And then all the copper in it. Okay, we're not going to just pull out the wires and use them again. But the value of raw copper when we melt it down is 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so on and so on. So you have this big dashboard that actually shows the value of the building and all the stuff in it.
That's cool.
That's to me the part of the future of it, because we, I mentioned that we did this study at VEC a couple of years ago with Adam and Unbuilders. We looked at the value of deconstructed homes if you really sort of broadly did that across the region, and we found that there was $250-300 million of high value old growth timber in older buildings across the city. That's not just garbage, that's value, and we're throwing it away right now. And I love the idea of
throwing it away.
Sorry,
Adam's not throwing it away.
No, well, Adam's not throwing it away, but you think of think of all the owners, right? Like the person looking at a redevelopment site and saying, "Oh God, how much asbestos do I have to cart out of here and all this crap?" Like, imagine. I mean, hope we're not all long dead when this is true, but someday someone looks at a building, they say, "Oh, look at all those goodies in there. Not only do I want the site, but I want the stuff too."
Yeah,
and that's a vision of value to me that gets me excited.
It is a great conversation and something that is incredibly thought provoking to think about the end of construction before you even get going. Mm-hmm. It's the whole chain that brings it all together, and I think that it's conversations like this. I like that we can geek out about it, and that we can get into the nitty gritties, because these are conversations. These are things that people are thinking often, mm-hmm. but to actually just go out down on those tangents. And I know we had a whole bunch of stuff that we wanted to kind of go through. I think we covered most of it.
I think we got through
a lot of it.
Are there any other things?
No, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about the productivity. Talked about we covered policy all throughout the conversation, and we did get to some of the embodied carbon stuff. But I think that it'd be great if do you want to leave anything with our audience or anyone that might be listening, paint just anything that would be a dream for the future, or like a positive, or just like a positive nugget, I guess, just to be leaving economics wise, construction wise, for the audience.
No, well, again, I got to thank you guys. This is so much fun to just let me come in and throw all my stuff on the table and geek out with you guys.
No.
I think for your listeners, like if you're a Vancouver-based business, and I say Vancouver in a general sense, if you're doing business in Vancouver, you don't need to have a head office here, and you're trying to figure out how to navigate stuff and it's getting confusing. I can't stamp your permit for you, but we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah.
If you're looking for help, I think where VEC really thrives, like me and my team, we like to help folks who are trying to bring a new product to market, that are trying to navigate something new and novel, like they're in the thinking phase right now. So I'll just give you one example. We're working with a company right now. I can't name who they are, but they're a local GC, and they're really starting to think about electrifying some of their construction equipment. And so we're asking some early questions with them about, like, okay, are you guys serious? Like, do you want to do this? What would it mean? There's actually a few policy incentives that are baked into what the city of Vancouver is doing. So you could get some benefits if you decided to actually go for that electrified equipment. So they're thinking about that. They're very savvy business folks who are like, yep, we like that. There's money on the table. Let's get it. But we're working on with them right now to figure out, okay, do we need to do some research first? Do we need to go do some market sounding and figure out who's offering this equipment and what's of interest to you, what's cost effective? Do we need to build a buyer's club of other GCs and start to get them to ask these same questions? Who knows? We're just in that early exploration phase, but we love talking to companies that are really trying to figure something like that out at the early stages. That's a lot of fun.
Nice.
The other one I'll name is workforce. Workforce. That's something I just spend a huge amount of my days on. We just brought a new person on my team that's working on it. We're actually building right now a regional workforce development coalition. And the idea is that we're bringing together employers, we've got local governments, we've got training institutions, we've got unions, we've got industry associations, and we're sitting here going, okay, folks, the pie is getting pretty tight here. If we're all scrambling for our own piece of it, we're not gonna. Okay, forget the pie metaphor. You know, but you know what I mean. That there's like we're running around.
I will.
I can't forget it.
I can't.
we're running around
Thanks,
at cross
George.
purposes, right? Like we're not leaning in the ways that we need to. We've got lots of associations building one-off little trainings. We've got companies investing in their own training, doing their own headhunting.
Yeah.
Can we find systems that work at scale? Because we don't want companies to feel like they need to do everything, right? You want to focus on your core business. So if you're struggling with workforce stuff, you're trying to think about how do I hire new folks? How can I be an attractive employer? Something I talked about this at the VRCA event, but we're always trying to get people to tell their story.
Yeah.
We actually think it's amazing how many companies do incredible work, and the only people that know about that are their immediate customers.
Right.
You got to tell your story. People are doing great stuff.
That's why we do the pod.
Yeah, that's what we do. Yeah.
So that would be another one. And then I guess the last one is if folks are thinking about what they need the sector to do. You're like, okay, I think there's actually a standard we need to, or we need to have a conversation as the industry about something. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be ESG, could be
What?
another one there. Could be about how you're thinking about investment, how you're thinking about being green. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about that stuff and you think that that's a conversation that needs to happen at a higher level than just your company,
Yeah.
come talk to us. That's stuff that we love to do. We try to lend a hand with it. And otherwise, come and talk to us. We're fun. We like to try to help people as best we can. And it's just so fun to engage with the sector. It's been really one of the thrills of my career to get to work with folks in construction. And I have no intention of changing that anytime soon.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, okay, now a little bit more about George. We're going to end with a little rapid fire round. I don't think we got to put you on the spot when we did our first micropod with you, but I hope you didn't have a chance to look at these.
Okay.
All right.
Just glance, but I won't do it.
But we're going to go through. George, what is something that you believe in or that you do that someone else would think is insane?
I love winter camping.
Oh,
I love to
is-
camp on glaciers.
That's pretty sweet, though.
Negative. Last time I did it when it was really cold, it's about -35. The fuel in our stove actually froze when my buddy and I were on the glacier.
Where were you?
We're in Garibaldi, so we were
Okay,
just
yeah.
on.
Oh, yeah,
do you know Wedge
nice.
Mountain?
yeah.
I don't know, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so we were just camping we're camping the Bergschrund, like the very top of the glacier, basically, on Wedge Mountain, and it got real cold.
Middle of winter.
Middle of winter.
That's pretty cool, though.
Jeez, that's cool. Is it like survivalist this stuff,
fun.
or are you well equipped and
Yeah,
you're going to be fine, no problem?
I mean, it's cold. This is why people think I'm crazy. Like, wait, you want to like lug 60 pounds around your back and climb up a mountain and then camp in the snow?
Yeah,
Like, yeah, absolutely. So that's the thing that people think I'm
I
insane
would.
for.
I would
What's
tend
the
to
what's
agree
the
with
network
that.
connection up there? 0?
No, actually, if you got to the top of Wedge, you'd have a great signal because you'd get it from Whistler.
Oh, okay, good. Right. So, what do you guys do?
James is planning.
No. I'm just curious. I'm thinking, what are you guys doing in there? I mean, you playing cards?
We're just walking. We're just
but you're
explore-
camping though.
I mean, we
Chatting,
don't
conversation.
sit still for very long.
Yeah.
Like we're usually hauling around and we're just chatting, just shooting the breeze.
So there's no like, okay, tense up. I'm not tired yet. What do you want to do? Is that happening or not?
Yeah, you sit around the fire for a little bit.
Yeah, it's like it's the culture of it and everything that goes with it. You're just out there.
Yahtzee? What about Yahtzee? You got
Yahtzee.
Yahtzee?
You know what? No, you're right. You know what we actually do is
Cribbage?
scary stories. We'll download a bunch on like a Kindle or print them off and bring them up with us, and we'll just read to each other around the fire.
Flashlight underneath the chin.
Ooh,
Yeah, gotcha.
That's cool, man. All right, if you weren't doing what you're doing right now, which you clearly love, what would you be doing?
I'll take it to construction. Something I've thought about I wanted to do it and I lost out on the apprenticeship actually. Or not the apprentice, but I was going to go do some shadowing. When I was in a teen, I wanted to be a bricklayer. Actually, and there was a local, he was like one of our main guys in Nanaimo who did it. And I never got the chance to work with him. And I was like, really, I just wonder what my life would be like if I'd done that. But it's something like that where you get to work with your hands. I miss that a bit, sending a lot of emails every day.
Okay.
Absolutely. Oh, it's fun being able to see something come together. And with bricks, it's like painting or landscaping. You can make something change from nothing to something pretty quick.
Yeah.
All right. Now, from your construction experience or from your mill experience, what is your favorite or most memorable story from the job site
God.
or being out there in the world?
Make it a good one, George.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of
Center that and give it
give it your all.
let's turn the lights down. Is it a scary story?
It's better. Yeah.
I got a funny one. Let me tell this one first and see if it lands. So for a while when I was working at the mill, one of my jobs was to go to the backyard and they had all these old pallets of wood. And these things had been sitting in the yard for like, God knows how long, probably 10 years. And so much of them are rotten, right? They were wrapped in saran wrap, all that kind of stuff, but they're just sitting there. And so for a couple months, my job was to go to the backyard, take one of these pallets, they'd zip it over on a forklift to me, and I'd unwrap it, and then I would just go through piece by piece, and I would look at assess the wood. Too many knots, chuck it in the thing. Too rotten, chuck it in a tub, and then they'd pulp it. And if it wasn't, then I would just restack it into a new pallet. And I did this 8 hours a day for months.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what? Honestly, it was one of my favorite jobs. It was just like, because again, it was like quick. You see the transition from this to that. You watch the thing change. But it was so meditative. Like, got super strong, just like doing this every day.
I was like emptying a dishwasher.
I was also a dishwasher for a while. And I also,
so was it that place on the old highway?
On the old highway, yes, it was. It was just outside of Coombs.
Yeah, that place.
Yeah.
You worked there they had all the windows and stacked in the front. Like it's a huge yard.
It was a huge yard. Yeah.
What's that place called?
I think it was called Center Island Cedar. Was where I was.
Okay. But what was that other scrapyard? Do you remember that place that had all that stuff hanging around?
I can't remember, but I know like with the cars and stuff too. Like it wasn't just
no.
wood.
It's all construction materials.
Oh no! I know what you're talking about. Oh hell!
Just past Goats on the Roof.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about, and I can't think of it.
You've been to Goats on the Roof, right? They got those goats on the top.
I know what it is.
And
Yeah.
they shit on your head.
Yeah.
And piss everywhere.
It's kind of like Restore, right? Like they sell all the old tiles and stuff like that, right?
Yeah,
Like just
exactly,
old materials. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, my mom used to shop there all the time because my first playhouse when we were kids.
Your mom used to shop there all the time.
Oh yeah, she loved it.
Yeah.
My mom loves she's like an amateur.
My mom used to shop
He's
there.
a real handyman.
Yeah.
Handy woman.
Person.
Handy person.
Yeah, whatever you like.
All right.
But she did that, yeah, and we used to go there all the time when I was a kid.
Nice.
It's a blast.
Cool.
Well, that is definitely a memorable story. Maybe memorable because you're like, I never want to do that again.
I mean, not for the rest of my life, but like, a month at a time, every year or so. It's like, get strong, get outside, do something meditative.
Right on.
Cool.
Okay. Well, the economic handyman, George Benson. It's fantastic to have you. Awesome conversation. I feel like this would be like got to do like a recap of what's going on in the market, what's going on in the economy, Vancouver, Canada, everything like that from time to time. So we'd love to have you back on. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both so much. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Right on. All right. Well, we got video as promised. If you love this episode and you're in construction or you know someone who is, be sure to share each of the site visit episodes, smash that like button, subscribe, and tune in to all of our episodes, which will be broadcast right here on our channel. See you next time.